Now, before we start creating sequences and getting into the editing part of this course, let's quickly come up into the preferences and make sure we're properly configured. Come up into the main menu under Edit, you'll find Preferences, and let's come into General. Now, there's tons of options in here that you can dig through. We're only going to be touching on just a few. The first one, under General, you'll find an option for Add Startup. You can actually decide what happens when you start up Premiere Pro first. You can show home, or you can just open up your most recent project automatically. I usually like to keep it at show home because in the later versions of Premiere Pro, that gives me a list of my previous projects anyways. The more important settings when you're first starting out is probably autosave. Here you can actually enable automatically saving your project, and that is highly recommended because if you're working on a heavy edit, Premiere Pro might sometimes crash or there's issues with your computer. So you probably want to set this to maybe save every 5 minutes automatically and how many past versions to retain. I'm just going to leave this on 20. So the most amount of work I'm ever going to lose is 5 minutes worth of work, and there'll be 20 old versions saved just historically where I can go back to. The next thing I recommend you have a look at is your media cache. As you import files into Premiere Pro and you start working with them and editing them, Premiere Pro will start writing cache files, little temporary preview files and peak files and other supporting data onto your hard drive to make Premiere Pro faster. Those ones will all be written to the media cache file location, so make sure you've configured this one to something sensible, otherwise this will just point to some user/temp Adobe folder. Now, if you find Premiere Pro is getting a bit slow or your hard drive is starting to fill up with these temp files, you can always just click delete and just flush your cache. There's no harm in this, it just means Premiere Pro might have to rebuild it. But this is a good thing to try out if you're having any issues previewing files or Premiere Pro starting to go a little bit laggy. Finally, let's quickly jump into the memory preferences, and in here you can define how much memory or how much RAM is accessible to Premiere Pro. Now, I have 64 gigabytes installed on my machine, and that is a slightly ridiculous amount, but I do a lot of visual effects work and a lot of 3D work that does require a lot of RAM. For working with Premiere Pro, I would recommend 16 gigabytes of RAM just so the rest of your system has enough to work with. But 8 gigabytes should be fine as long as you're not working with large 4K files or anything like that. Now you have to define how much RAM to reserve for other applications. So Premiere Pro will use everything except what you leave. Now I would recommend setting this to 8 if you have 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you have 8 gigabytes of RAM, I would probably set that to 4 just so that Premiere Pro has a decent amount of RAM to work with and your other applications have enough left over. Also, down at the bottom, optimize rendering for. If you have this option, again, only available in later versions of Premiere Pro, make sure that this is set to performance rather than memory. It'll simply make Premiere Pro go faster. Now, there's tons of other options in here, and I highly recommend just go through these, see which ones make sense and tweak them to your liking. You can also read up on them on the Adobe help site. But let's just finish this off and actually get to the editing. And for that, let's talk about importing media into your project in the next lesson.